Good afternoon, I guess good evening for those calling in from across the pond, or good morning if we're speaking to folks on the West Coast. My name is Will Morris. I am the Chief Medical Information Officer here at Google Cloud. And welcome to Summer Camp. It's hard to believe that summer is unfortunately halfway over, but our tour to education is still going strong. We have an absolutely exciting, action-packed 45 minutes with Dr. Andy Beck, who is a MD, PhD, Harvard-trained pathologist, visionary entrepreneur. We'll hear a little bit more about his journey, but kind of explaining the space of digital pathology and certainly how AI is playing a profound role in this. So welcome. Camp rules, right? We can't have a campfire if we don't have some rules. So just as an awareness, this will be recorded and shared. We hope this serves as an educational standpoint, content-wise, and we want to make this freely and openly available to all. Try to pin the speakers. We have god-awful backgrounds. But that way, while we're talking, you can make sure that we're pinned. Please mute the line. We don't want this conversation to be buggy, so to speak. Luckily, I think we have the power to mute you all, but just as a reminder, traditional etiquette. And then please use the Q&A. We're going to do, try to service all of the questions throughout the dialogue. This is not a Socratic lecture. This is not going to be a chalk talk. This is going to be a dialogue. And so in the last three, we found that the best kind of questions are not coming from myself, but actually from the audience. So please ask many and all, and we will do our best to answer it. So with that said, Dr. Beck, welcome to Summer Camp. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So we've got a pretty broad audience, right? Some AI, some clinical, and a lot going, what is digital pathology? So before we kind of go into your journey with PathAI, can you kind of take us a step back as a trained pathologist? What does this actually mean in layman's terms, so to speak, and take us through the journey up until 2016 when you founded PathAI?
Sure, happy to. So why don't I start with just what is digital pathology? A lot of fields, when you add the word digital, it's sort of extra because they're already digital. We don't talk about, digital banking or something, at least not today. Well, pathology is not yet digital, but it clearly will be. So to give you some sense of where pathology is, and I guess perhaps which parts of pathology aren't digital. So pathology is the specialty of medicine that's a laboratory-based specialty that takes as input tissue specimens from patients and produces as output the diagnosis of what is on that tissue. So in many cases, this is critical for monitoring diseases or for determining definitive diagnosis to guide downstream medical care. So whenever you get blood drawn at a visit and it's sent to a lab, that's a pathology lab. Pathology labs have two broad parts, one that deals mostly with blood-based testing called clinical pathology. And I think in many respects, that is fairly digital already. We have large automated machines that can analyze that and create quantitative outputs that then go into reports that I'm sure you've seen if you've ever had any blood work done. The other big specialty within pathology, and the one that I think the term digital pathology usually applies to, is the specialty of anatomic pathology. And the case here would be you go to the dermatologist, they see something on your skin, they're not sure what it is, so they want to take a biopsy of it to look at it to have a physician look at it under the microscope and determine the diagnosis. So here, a physical piece of tissue is will be taken off of you and sent to the anatomic pathology lab. And this is the specialty that's about over 90% not digital yet, but we're at a real inflection point where it's becoming more digital. And the process there is this tissue that just got cut off your arm is sent to the lab. It's dehydrated and fixed and put on a paraffin wax block. And the reason it's put on a block is to really solidify it in space so that thin sections can be cut off. And then those thin sections of kind of your your tumor, your tissue embedded in wax, are then stained with histologic stains that will highlight different structures on the tissue. And then the patterns seen on those structures on the glass slide are what's going to determine the diagnosis. And traditional pathology that's not digital, so I'd say kind of standard anatomic pathology, the process is pathologist is looking at physical glass slides and sticking them under a microscope, and the microscope is creating images, but those images aren't recorded or captured digitally. They're only looked at in your brain and go to your retina, and people are interpreting these images and making diagnosis, and then transferring whatever diagnosis they make onto the report that will then go back to your doctor for guiding care. So digital, which is the first big step to answer your question, digital pathology is saying, look, these images should be captured digitally. And once they're captured digitally, they can be stored indefinitely. They can be used for collaboration, as well as, of course, we can then apply machine learning to assist physicians in interpreting those images to make it more efficient and higher quality for patients to ensure they're getting the right diagnosis to guide the right therapeutic decision. So that's kind of digital pathology, and why digital pathology is so tied to this AI-powered digital pathology. And at PathAI, we work on both. So that's kind of an overview of the field. Before I get into kind of how I got into this, Will, anything else on the overview of digital pathology?
No, it's fascinating kind of in the journey, because there's oftentimes people, and I'm curious if you think there's an appropriate comparison between radiology and digital pathology being, one of films and now a CCD, a digital camera, but yet pathology predates the invention of, was it 1600 or 1655 was Robert Hooke's first microscope. So you have been around a lot longer than radiology, but yet it's interesting that now, digital pathology is kind of on that bandwagon, and there was an inflection point between the two. Is there a fair comparison between radiology and digital pathology in that journey?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting comparison. I think so people can think about how these are different. So under pathology, we're analyzing microscopic images. So we're looking within single cells and then looking at populations of hundreds of thousands to 1 million cells organized into tissue structures and often pathological processes on one slide. Whereas in radiology, you're looking at much larger scale. So you're looking at, you don't have microscopic resolution. So the really out of the body, super high resolution is pathology, and the more low resolution, but something you can monitor more over time, is this kind of in vivo imaging with radiology. Yeah, I think the similarities and differences are interesting. Like you say, the microscope was invented much before X-rays. So it's much, much older technology. And the workflow was optimized for many years for viewing this under the microscope. And the atlases that you would see to train pathologists from the 1800s are not all that different from the atlases you'd see from the 20th century. So there's this huge history of people learning a certain way and a certain clinical workflow of looking at glass slides, looking at atlases of images, and doing this all manually with glass slides. So that workflow was optimized over years, which I think radiology is much sooner. They're much more used to rapidly changing technologies. So it became digital much faster. The other thing about pathology is you are adding an additional step. It is not natively digital, I think, in the same way that you could think about radiology as more natively digital. So in pathology, you're starting with physical tissue, you're embedding it on a glass slide, but you're not taking a picture, you're generating an image, and then that image is not of the whole slide image. So the infrastructure to actually get these whole slide imaging systems into place and convert a regular image into a digital image, I think adds one step to the workflow. And I think only recently we've really seen the power of machine learning to significantly improve on what you can do just on a manual image, because the truth is the microscope is a fantastic piece of technology, very high resolution images. Pathologists can work with it very interactively and very quickly. So I think you really needed a significant value proposition to displace it, and then to really show the advantages of going digital about collaboration, being able to send images around the world easily, and of course, being able to augment digital image review with machine learning.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I love this kind of intersection of profound technology, which opens up a whole bunch of new use cases, but change management, right? Workflows and stuff that are oftentimes barriers. Take us back to, now everyone's putting digital or AI on their, new startups, and yet you guys have been doing this for quite some time. So take us back to, the inception of this. with PathAI's journey, and kind of specifically what areas were you most excited about this, both digital, but also, the AI component around these images?
Sure. So I think it's been a fairly obvious use case of AI for 70 years, let's say. Like, I think if you read the very early work on AI, one of the big applications people were always interested in was image interpretation, computer vision, with rule-based systems and other approaches. So it's a kind of a long-standing problem in AI, and we're to some degree towards the end of it. When we started in 2016, I think people were struggling with this for many years. I actually started this. This was part of what I did my PhD on back in 2011, essentially right before kind of deep learning changed everything. So I kind of knew and was working hard at the state of the art right before then, which was a lot about feature engineering, and human-derived features was a really big part of it. And you could try to scale that and use many features to train machine learning models, but it had clear limitations in terms of how powerful the models were, how generalizable they were. So I'd say that was kind of the pre-PathAI was, that was the state of the art, say in 2010, things like support vector machines with very carefully engineered features. And I think what got really exciting when we started, which honestly the wave is still increasing, I'd say the same technology wave, was really the big advance in deep learning in the 2012 timeframe. And then this became a very clear application of that. And we were one of the first groups to apply deep convolutional neural nets back in 2016 when we started the company to applications in pathology. And it just worked so much better than anything before. So then you could really start to draw a very clear technology roadmap of where this is going. And honestly, you couldn't before. Everything else was little use cases. Some of them worked well, some of them didn't. Here was one technology that was working so much better than everything before it on relatively small data sets, but they were scaling and getting better with bigger data sets. So it was obvious that at scale, these systems were going to work extremely well. And I'd say that some of the underlying machine learning methodology has changed, but it's the same idea of learning from very large data sets for tasks in vision are in every industry are going to be transformed by the power of machine learning. And I think we were at kind of the end of it. People have been trying this from the 1950s. The biggest advance that came in the early 2010s. We've had another set of big advances the past few years, but we're very much getting to the point where the technology works in extremely strong across a very broad set of applications.
And maybe kind of help the audience think about, so while the technology is kind of, really advanced and has opened the doors, it's also opened up new workflows and things that otherwise our visual cortex couldn't do. Thinking like a companion diagnostic or even a trial endpoint based on, what's a classifier or grouped. Like, help us kind of understand that, hey, digital pathology is not just, hey, we can do now remote or pathology, right? Have someone else, physically read a slide that's, not near their slide. That's great. But this seems like it's opened up a whole new world, and help us kind of take us back to that time where you're like, holy smokes, this is going to fundamentally change how pathology is done.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And kind of there's two big buckets that we think of. And one goes back to the idea that you said that microscopes have been around for a long time. So people, maybe not in the most efficient way, but have been generating knowledge about which patterns in these images are important for literally hundreds of years. And then that forms the basis of the standard of care today. So a big part of what we work on is, one, the clinical workflow. So that's critical. How do you actually incorporate this into the clinical workflow of pathologists? A lot of that is not specifically machine learning. It's also workflow tools, operational tools, speed, computational efficiency. How do you get from the analysis of an image to a report as fast as possible? And then there's identifying the patterns that are known to be important today, but doing it with a level of accuracy and reproducibility that is not achievable manually. And I don't have a visual example right in front of me right now, but you can imagine a very simple task that is not particularly exciting, or you're not discovering something new, is how many brown cells are there in a population of non-brown cells. this is actually the core of a lot of companion diagnostics by a technology called IHC, where basically the IHC will highlight which cells are expressing the drug target, and those cells will be brown. All the other cells that are not expressing the drug target will be not brown. And frequently physicians use this number of brown cells as the key metric to decide which therapy to put a patient on or not put a patient on. And that decision can actually cause cure of a incurable disease, or if you get it wrong, the opposite, a bad outcome for an incurable disease. So some of it is just taking this task that a human can't literally look at 1 million cells in one image. It's impossible. Whereas the AI system doing a very simple task over and over very well can get an exact estimate of a known biomarker. So that's a very powerful use case. And that's not even addressing your question. That's just saying the things we know are important today, how do we do them even better using machine learning? And that's about half of it. The beauty is, in parallel, when analyzing that exact same image, you can do what's known to be important today, as I just described, but you can accumulate very large data sets with treatment and outcome data, and in the background, aim to learn from those data to identify new features that might outperform the known features in better predicting outcome. And you could come up with a novel companion diagnostic in that way. So the power of digital is you get the standard measure that's needed today. And as you said, that could be done through remote scoring or other ways where it's more efficient. But then in the background, you're accumulating this data to really build the novel diagnostics of tomorrow. And many of these things may be ones that we had no prior hypothesis or bias that they're going to be the most important. And we've seen that innumerable times.
I mean, I remember, so not a pathologist, but, in med school, you always would go down to pathology and you'd sit on the 5-headed microscope and you'd look for, if you have tuberculosis, and try to find that one acid fast bacilli. And it seemed like it's, the needle in the haystack came, to much like your brown cell. So with these kind of operational efficiency, clinical, more qualitative, not quantitative, or quantitative outcomes and new, endpoints or diagnostics, where is the field in terms of going, hey, listen, whole slide, traditional ways of looking at it, we should be digitizing them, today. Let's just build that cohort in anticipation that there's going to be apps, there's going to be capabilities that will then surface those images. Like, where do you see that kind of inflection happening where people are like, it's a done deal, we need to digitize our, Iron Mountain repository of glass?
Yeah, so I think, 2024 has been a really big year for the field. And, we've been around since 2016, so we've really witnessed it and witnessed which areas of the market were going the fastest. So I would say now it's very much a question, in every discussion, it's a question of kind of when, not if, that absolutely wasn't true several years ago. So we're kind of working at the interface of both drug development, working with most of the top 20 and a large number of pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, where it's very much becoming the routine for translational research for running clinical trials to ensure that slides are being digitized in a way that just wasn't true several years ago. And I would say even more interesting was we just at PathAI released, over the past 12 months or so, released a clinical platform to serve clinical labs, because we saw that side of the market really starting to turn. And that's happened even faster than we had expected, because as you said, it can changing things in clinical medicine often takes time. But this has been a long time coming, in the sense of the first FDA cleared whole slide imagers were almost a decade ago. So now really is the time, based on a number of other forces outside of pathology, that folks on the clinical side are really starting to see this transformation from glass to digital, changes that occurred with COVID pandemic and work changes where enabling pathologists not to come into the lab and sign out remotely were partly a tailwind for that. But now just the overall emphasis on digitization, and then much wider recognition of the power of AI, not only today, but even more so in the future, is causing both academic medical centers, small labs, and large reference labs to all begin to move from glass to digital. And I would say the overall percentage right now is something like in the order of 10%. So starting from essentially zero or low, now we're in double digits. And I think we're going to see a real inflection to 50%, 60%, 80% in the coming years, because it's absolutely what I think is pretty agreed upon. That's what the future should look like for many of the reasons we mentioned.
I mean, I remember having this conversation probably 5-6 years ago, and there's the incredulous, and again, not saying the pathologists are any different than, I remember radiologists saying, I need to have my hanging light box. I can't see what I see, with an image. With the pathology, it was, latency. They can zoom in, they can zoom out, and there wasn't any kind of staccatic, movement. But that's changed. I mean, your viewer kind of puts that to rest.
Yeah, those are very legitimate concerns. And to the point I mentioned before, the microscope had been optimized with human workflow in mind for many years. So there were many, I'd say, technically difficult workflow challenges that had to be overcome through really good use of computing and user experience and the viewer. So those are largely overcome. There's still a few things we're working on because we don't think we're all the way there, even just on the viewing experience. Yeah. But we think we're for say 95% of things, we are there. And then that's just the baseline when you're sort of trying to compare the exact same experience. There's all of these huge advantages to the collaboration tools and to just how machine learning can assist in interpretation and reporting. So once those are all kind of combined, it's a very clear value proposition for pathologists. And a lot of the technology advances, in cloud being a huge driver, are only relatively recent, and simply the first generation of products were unable to incorporate those technologies that we're able to incorporate today.
Yeah, no, I think that's the exciting thing. U.S. focus, international, just given the nature of the opportunity where, a scarcity of phenomenal, highly trained pathologists is a reality. Are you seeing this as a more global? Is U.S. leading that 10%, or are you seeing other emerging markets?
Definitely global. I think many of the advantages are seen even more so globally. I mean, they're seen in the US, but we're very much seeing this as a global phenomenon, particularly areas like you mentioned with far too few pathologists, where you may not have pathologists who are experts in the area that you need near the physical location where the lab is generating the glass. And then your options are mailing it, which could take days, or in real time, having a digital image sent to that person. So the value propositions are a bit different around the world, but we are seeing this as a global phenomenon.
We have a question here. Can't Gen AI reinforcement learning with decision tree work here?
Yeah, I mean, part of what's so exciting about this is it's pathology at its core is a complex set of machine learning problems, unlike a lot of medicine. I mean, I guess you want to be so reductionist, you could say at some point everything reduces. Since maybe our brains are very complex machine learning systems, but a lot of that involves robotics, it involves working directly with patients, it involves precision moving things in the real world, whereas this truly is information processing. So yes, many of the latest advances in machine learning, including generative AI approaches of reinforcement learning, and certainly decision trees for piecing together multiple different models that are each doing different things, can be very useful for solving the core task, which is translation of literally a messy piece of wet tissue into a precise set of quantitative metrics to guide downstream clinical decision-making, and then to be stored in the background for future discovery and research. So those approaches and others are very useful here because it's at its core, it's a machine learning problem.
And so for PathAI, you mentioned you touch on preclinical, translational, and then clinical with a viewer. Where are you seeing, what excites you? Building out these models early on and looking for new endpoints, new targets, or is it more, how do I assist the swamped pathologist? How do I give he or she superpowers to be more efficient in yielding the most accurate and well quantized diagnosis? Like, where on that spectrum? Because I can imagine it feels like there's a myriad of places to go.
Yeah, no, I'd say what excites me, and I think excites the company the most, is really thinking of it, like you said, from the physician's perspective, or even the patient's perspective, where if you're a patient and you undergo a biopsy, which is probably one of the most stressful and important medical decisions that you will encounter in your whole life for you or a family member, it's really thinking through how we can leverage this technology to ensure that patients around the world have the highest chance of getting the right diagnosis and then getting access to a curative therapy from that. So because kind of we're starting from that space, we're very excited about the overall increasing market demand for digital and for AI, and to really make sure our platform is serving the needs of patients and ultimately, physicians and ultimately patients. And in many cases, that will be doing what's known to be important today better and better. But we also, in terms of curing patients of serious diseases, the work we do in drug development and on discovery is also extremely important, because many diseases today are still incurable, or the cure rates are still far lower than we'd like them to be, particularly for serious diseases like cancer. So there we are also very extremely motivated by how this can be used to discover through research the patient subsets that will truly be cured by new therapies. And then on our clinical platform, then to be able to distribute those to patients around the world. So it's really both of those. And what's so exciting about pathology is it's really at this interface of clinical medicine and science, and it's a perfect place to really focus digital pathology and AI.
What everyone loves to throw around is, doctor specialty X will be replaced by AI. And, I think the quote that I think Al Gore probably said it then, because everyone says that they did, that doctors will be replaced by doctors who use AI. Where are we in the space of kind of digital pathology or pathology in general, where it is a normal aspect of routine care, much like a radiologist behind the scenes are using a lot of segmentation, classification, reconstruction. Where do you see, we're at 10% digital. Are we at 5% using kind of these tools?
Yeah. So the first part of your question, I think it's, as long as you're not reducing what a pathologist does to simply say counting brown cells or other things, which isn't what a pathologist does. It really is, to some degree, that sometimes people call the pathologist the physician's physician. It's how do you provide the right diagnostic information to guide the right, at least, options for treatment decisions. And we're not focused on many aspects of medicine, but pathology really is responsible for that. So that task, I think any pathologist you ask is going to want to be augmented by machine learning and not have to be responsible for looking at 1 million cells per slide and being completely up to date on the literature and all the latest approvals. So machine learning can really help the pathologist. So no one on the inside, I think, is particularly concerned with replacement, partly because there's just so few. In the US, there's something like 15,000 pathologists. And overall, a number that's talked about a lot is pathology results inform something like 70% of medical decisions, of all medical decisions. So there's too few people, there's more and more information, there's more biopsies and tissue specimens happening. So it's a great area for machine learning to augment and assist. And I do think the exact daily work of the pathologist, of course, will change. It'll be different in 5 years than it was 5 years ago. But there's certainly going to be as much a need, if not more, for pathologists than there were in the past. In terms of the adoption of AI, the second part of your question, so you need the substrate of digital. So now we're at about 10% there. We think once things are digital, there are algorithms that can provide value on every single slide. Some of these will be things like artifact detection, case prioritization, things that are relatively easy to get out because they're being used in a way behind the scenes for workflow. So I think all of the labs that go digital, if you're using, say, our platform, you could use AI essentially to assist in every case in workflow. In terms of the diagnostic applications and the more specific applications, I think we're in the early days of it. There are a few FDA cleared products on the market. There are a number of RUO research use only type algorithms, including some from our team. So I think we're 10% digital. I think workflow tools are there. I think we have some diagnostic applications, but I think the vast majority of them will be coming out in the next few years. And I think to some degree, the timing is a good thing, because some of the advances we've seen in machine learning are very new, and having the diagnostic models coming out in the next several years can really leverage the power of things like foundation models and other technologies that are relatively early still.
How are you at PathAI thinking about so it's the clinician, it's the dreaded clinical correlation, in the report, right? We get a report that says clinical correlation or what have you. And how much are you thinking about using the medical chart or other context to shape, inform, tune, guide that model such that the performance characteristics are better, as EHRs and the unstructured mess that is the, my note, now allows it to be parsed and create an embedding source. How are you thinking about these net new signals to inform those models?
Yeah, so I think once these systems are in place, step one is getting folks digital.
Yep.
Having the monitoring systems in place for just monitoring performance of the system itself is extremely important and valuable, and seeing performance over time and things like drift over time.
Yep.
But then to your question, the next step, which is extremely natural and powerful, is how do you then integrate this with the EMR and really capturing longitudinal data over time to then go back and inform new versions of the model, or create multimodal models that are even better at prediction than, say, the single mode model. So absolutely, that's very much on our roadmap, and I think where the field is headed. And this is just a critical core step to getting there.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't know about the audience, but like my mind is moving at a mile a minute, just thinking about kind of what this truly unlocks is a moment in time. And for someone who's been literally doing this as their core career, what excites you? What are the, we're not there yet. What are those, the brutal realities, not to, get too wrapped up in the hype. You've got a lot of Googlers on, Google research. What do you need from, a hyperscaler? What are those things that are barriers? So maybe a two-part question is, what makes you up,
Sure.
in the morning, and then what's keeping you up at night that you wish others in the field could help?
Yep. So the first, what's the most exciting thing right now, and maybe I can speak from the PathAI perspective. I think we're seeing these two things really happen in parallel that are exciting. One, this big technology advance. So I think deep convolutional neural nets were very exciting, over a decade ago, and I think we took those extremely far with fully supervised models, how well they could work for very specific tasks. I think we've all been, especially for vision applications, like really amazed by vision transformers and foundation models and how good they can perform across a broad set of tasks, and how embeddings from a high-performing foundation model can then be used to train very fast models across a very broad set of tasks. And it's very clear in the way it was in 2016, like where this is headed. Like we're going to be able to solve with machine learning all of the core tasks in anatomic pathology. So I think on the technology side, that's really exciting because we can see the applications. I think the other area that I'm extremely excited about is just truly the timing with the market adoption. So one example that's public that I can speak to, we just announced a very major partnership with Quest Diagnostics, which is essentially the largest anatomic pathology lab in the US, that's making a major commitment to digital pathology and AI, as seeing that as the future. So seeing large leaders in the field really share our vision for how we can improve outcomes for patients and transform diagnostics with this technology is extremely exciting. Another and new, and it's predicting the timing of that is difficult, even if the technology is there. But now I think we're really seeing the convergence. And on the other side, on the drug development side and the precision diagnostics, earlier this year we also announced a very major partnership with Roche Tissue Diagnostics, the largest manufacturer of companion diagnostics, which are new diagnostics that identify patients for new therapies, and they see digital pathology and AI as a major component of the future of companion diagnostics. So I think we're seeing this convergence of interest in drug development, interest on the diagnostic side, as well as just the core underlying technology.
And what are those, I don't want to say headwinds, other than the change management? We can talk on billing as well, a reimbursement. But from a technical standpoint, what is your call to action or wish list? Other than free compute, which I can't do, but
yeah, free compute. So some of it is these images are very large. So we invest heavily in technology and work with great cloud partners to try to decrease the cost and improve the user experience as fast as possible for going through what we see as the future. Every pathologist reviewing hundreds of images digitally per day. So we need to have the scalability and the capability to analyze millions of images in parallel at low cost with extremely high reliability. So I'd say that's one area we focus heavily, is how do we both delight our users and make it super cost effective for them to make it a no-brainer for them to go from the microscope to digital.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is just some of these transformations take time. They're hard to, you're not fully in control of it. So it's finding the areas and the users who really are ready to scale and want to scale, because it's a market that's still developing. And we still have, say, the 90% of labs that are using glass slides. So it's really reaching those folks at the right time who are making that transformation. And then, of course, on the drug development side, it's still a really hard challenge. I mean, we still have many incurable diseases that we're really trying to identify the right patients who may respond to a treatment who could fail in all comers but be successful in a subset. So it's forming those partnerships and working with partners with the right data sets for really making an impact on new therapies. So those are some of the things that we think about daily, is how to really increase the value we can bring on the drug development side and also on the diagnostic side. And in terms of specific technology, I think a lot of it has to do with the question that came up. Just these images are so large and there's so much compute to do in parallel on every single one.
And do you see in that opportunities for, where storage will be the whole image, or it will be an embedding model of that image in which you can then kind of do magic with, and you need not store the whole thing, or just specific areas of that whole slide where you don't need the edge and you don't need normal stroma and normal cells. How do you?
Yeah.
What's the cost constant?
So,
how do you think about this? If I'm a small hospital with negative margins, this is adding cost.
Right. Yeah. So one, think about ways for it to not add cost. For example, you have multiple technical labs. Digital could actually be the enabler to focus on only having a single technical lab and then being able to distribute digital images. So there are sort of short, immediate cost savings approaches, even for relatively small hospitals. And that is what they're motivated by and see the reason to make the investment. The other is the collaboration, not having to send glass around and having access to pathologists around the world who are digital. In terms of the specific, so there are immediate advantages even to small or low margin hospitals who may not have a lot of extra resources to invest in technology. In terms of the storage, a lot of it's to do with the use. So if it's being used for primary diagnosis, it will be important to hold on either to the glass slide, and I'd say that the image that was used to make the diagnosis, it depends, different policies around the world and different policies of different institutions. But certainly holding on to a much reduced version of the embeddings is very useful for research or for other use cases. So I think a lot of times it's going to be a question of the policies of the specific hospital, as well as which type of storage. Is it long-term storage? Is it hotter storage? And is it for research use case or for sort of clinical compliance use?
Yeah, and so I didn't realize that there's a hidden Q&A amongst the Q&A. So questions around infrastructure that will be going live with PathAI. Is it similar to kind of think about it like a PACS system? Is DICOM, like, what are your thoughts on kind of on that infrastructure for a health system or ASC?
Yeah, so a huge part of what we've built is the core infrastructure, and it has analogies to a PACS system for radiology, and in particular in pathology, the terms that are widely used are image management system for storing and searching the images, and then the viewer, which is essentially where the pathologist is spending, say, 8 hours a day interacting with the image. Then there's the reporting component, and then of course there's how machine learning can assist in each of those. So we have a cloud-based system that has all of those, I'd say, core infrastructure elements that would apply to every slide you digitize, and it works broadly across a broad set of different whole slide imaging systems. And we do view the infrastructure part kind of as the radiology PACS system. We also have the viewer, and then we have the machine learning algorithms in addition.
How much of that experience would transform your actual clinical training, where I would imagine you would have the ability to annotate, to tag in? It's kind of like a meeting, GVC, Google meeting, where I need to bring in the specialist or my preceptor. Are you seeing some really, really kind of novel ways that pathology training, fellowship training is going to be also transformed?
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, so much of training is just literally you're training your vision language type model in your brain. And we all know the way you do training is you just have to be exposed to a lot of pairs of this is the case, this is the diagnosis, this is why it's the diagnosis. So it's truly, that's the way the training works. And I think in the past, it's been much more ad hoc, depending on what set of glass slides come through. Whereas here, I think, one, you can have very standardized, comprehensive set of training databases of digital images paired with the diagnosis for folks to train from, I'm sure you can use machine learning to assist people in interpreting of those images. So where machine learning is helping to train the human. So without a doubt, I think it can be very powerful. It will be very powerful just in the typical resident workflow. Like, for example, we've had many requests, and we offer this feature to actually be able to have permissioning on who has access to the machine learning. So in some cases, you may not want trainees to have access to what the machine learning thought, because you want them to, actually test their skill at interpreting the image essentially blindly or without the assistance of machine learning. You wouldn't want the machine learning to be a hindrance to really learning the core underlying patterns yourself. So we offer that in our system, particularly that's useful for academic medical centers.
I love it.
And then when everything's digital, you can
want
imagine spiking in true positives. That's the other thing. Like you can be monitoring people's performance in the background in a way you just can't do with the microscope. Sorry, Will, I interrupt you.
No. I was going to say you can't, use Waymo to take your driver's ed test. So
Right.
You have to demonstrate some faculties. Well, listen. I think we can. Let me touch on one last area that I think is kind of topical around the regulatory space, and FDA and this is kind of cutting edge, and where you are going is a brave new world. And how are regulatory agencies keeping up, thinking about this? Is there, a tight relationship, I would imagine, in the space between this kind of breakthrough science and the regulatory agencies that are kind of trying to keep up?
Absolutely. So regulatory agencies, and I can cite the FDA as our US-based example, have been, I'd say, very forward-looking in thinking about machine learning and the different set of machine learning applications, putting out a number of different guidelines. And ultimately, I think they're really excited about the potential of the technology if well validated and well controlled by regulators, because it really can create an amount of accuracy and reproducibility that we think will be superior to what can be achieved with just essentially uncontrolled manual scoring, where there can be tremendous heterogeneity across the population. I think regulators are excited that by machine learning assisting physicians' opinions, you can really help standardize folks to the right diagnosis. And a lot of the metrics used to judge the success and failure of a physician assisted by machine learning are going to be very similar metrics to those that are used to assess the performance of a physician operating by themselves, things like sensitivity, specificity. And then to some degree, anatomic pathology has been an outlier because it isn't quantitative and it's so not automated. So the FDA also has a strong framework for other diagnostic modalities that are already more automated. This has just been one that's taken a very long time to automate. So the FDA and other regulatory bodies are highly involved. I think we'll be great partners for ensuring that we're really building safe and effective tools to distribute to improve patient care.
Well, I know we're up on time, and I, first of all, just want to thank you, Dr. Beck, and congratulate you and the team at PathAI for not only kind of being the doctor's doctor, but I actually think being the computer scientist's doctor as well. Clearly, you are, forging ahead this tremendous intersection between, cutting edge science and technology. In fundamentally transforming the way we manage patients, think about trials. And so I think, if you're not excited on this call and seeing this true moment in time, you're under a rock, because this is it. This doesn't get any more exciting. So I wish to really sincerely thank you. Your partnership with Google obviously is really important to us, and we're proud of that. But moreover, what you're doing for patients is tremendous. Following this, we get to talk about the other side of the world, which is radiology and enterprise imaging, and then we will conclude with closing out ceremony of TAPS, I guess, if it's summer, if it's camp, with research and collaboration on the 21st. But thank you, Dr. Beck, and thank you, PathAI, and hope you all have a lovely day. Cheers.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.